Hi everyone, good morning to another episode of our live empowerED session. And every weekend, we have been going live to talk about the most important topics or challenges and issues that we have been facing as one education system in the Philippines right now. And today we are on our fourth episode, and we will be focusing on one of the most used resources that we have right now. Regardless of the modality that we will have in distance education, we will be using a lot of text-based learning resources. And in the past evaluation of our live session, we asked for the topics that you want us to discuss or talk about so that we can help you become a more effective educator in distance education. And you mentioned about creating modules, designing modules. But then in the end, when I was speaking to one of our speakers today, he mentioned that it's not just on correspondence print based distance education that text-based learning resources will play a major role. Regardless of the modality, we will need to understand what it means to create effective text-based learning resources. And that was a great insight from one of our speakers. And so right now, we want to contextualize it and say that our topic is not just for those people or teachers who will be using print-based distance education modality. Even if you're doing offline, digital, or even creating your script for your audio-based learning resources, text are very, very important. They are essential ingredients to making learning better. So, a few reminders before we start. So, we welcome our guest first. There are a lot of participants right now. Early on, I've seen a comment from an educator in Jakarta. By the way, also the education attaché of the Ministry of Education of Indonesia is actually a fan of Empower Ed. So thank you so much. She's been messaging, she's been in contact with me and telling that we've been very, very helpful. So thank you so much from the Philippines, from Manila to Indonesia. Thank you so much. A few things, a few reminders. How do you join this? Well, you're watching right now. The next part will be for you to participate. You can send in your comments, your insights, your questions, which we will be picking up at the end of the session before we end so that we can answer and interact with you. Second, share. Share this to your fellow teachers, to your colleagues and friends who might need to understand or maybe just to listen. We know that it's a Saturday morning. Some of you might be working, some of you might be working, cleaning your houses. Saturday is house cleaning. I remember my mother, that's the motto in our home when I was young and living in Abra. Saturday is general cleaning day. So just turn on your gadgets, listen, and interact. And then lastly, we will show the link to the evaluation form to make sure that you are able to send in your learnings, your evidence of learning, quote and unquote, and then of course receive your certificate of participation. Just a reminder, this has been one of the challenges that we have over at the empowerED team. We are giving certificates using some automatic response system, right? So when you answer the evaluation form, the tool that we're using actually uses the credentials that you include in the evaluation form. There are a lot of emails bouncing back. There are a lot of emails bouncing back because some of you have wrongly or included or typed in your email. Like for example, deped.gov.ph. Some of you just write deped.gov. You forget the most important other letters in your email addresses. So please, please, please. And then your name, the spelling. Come on, teachers, educators. Before you submit, check. Check your spelling. You always remind your students about that. Now it's our time to practice it. Okay? So those are just a few of the reminders that I have right now. We are live on YouTube, on Facebook. So whatever app you are using right now. Send in your comments. We can see your comments here. So there, let's start our discussion. Now I am very much happy to welcome our guest. Our theme today is developing effective text-based learning resources for distance education. And when we say distance education, we hope and we want to discuss text-based resources in whatever modality. And right now, I just want to say also that this session is in partnership also with, I hope I get it right, in partnership with the Philippine Board on Books for Young People. Zara has been working with me on this, but of course we also have a representative. So this we're very happy to have a representative, none other than the president, of course, of the Reading Association of the Philippines. So we are joined by two important organizations about literacy. So I can't wait to welcome them. So I'm just gonna start putting them up in our screen. We will start with, of course, the one that I mentioned already, Mr. Frederick Sotto Perez. He's the president of the Reading Association of the Philippines, aside from being the vice principal of Xavier School Novali in Laguna. Hi, Mr. Perez.
Hello, Jim. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here.
All right. We can't wait to hear from the president of the Reading Association of the Philippines. And then we have the next guest. Her name is Zarah Gagatiga. She is the school librarian, but more importantly, she is also a children's book writer. And she is here with me representing the PB. Is this correct? PBBYP, or I just say it, Philippine Board on Books for Young People. Zara,
It's
is
Philippine
that
Board on
correct?
Books for Young People, Jim. Yeah,
Right.
it's PBBY, Philippine Board on
Okay.
Books for Young People. And I'm very happy to also say that the Reading Association of the Philippines is a member of the PBBY. They represent the
Oh,
advocacy sector, the reading advocacy sector. And our other guest is also belonging to a group that has always supported and partnered with the PBBY. So I'll say it when you introduce our next guest.
yes, our last guest. Okay, and she'll be bringing another dimension. Because we're all educators here. We have Liza Flores. She's an illustrator, and a lot of her work is really in design and in arts, right?
Yes.
Illustrations. She is an illustrator of children's book, and under her belt are design. I heard a while ago that she's designed websites. So a lot of expertise coming from that area from Liza. So hi Liza, welcome to the
Hello,
show.
good morning. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
And you are part of PBBY.
I'm a member of INC, ang Illustrator ng Kabataan. So it's the Philippines' first and only organization of illustrators for children. So
Oh, wow.
um, it's our 29th year this year. So we started in 1991. So
Wow.
it's a an old organization.
It's not old, it's relevant. One of the
Yes.
pioneer. I think that's the better word.
Yes.
Pioneer. It's a
Yes,
pioneer.
we're the first that we're still the only organization of illustrators up to this time
All right. So right
For
now,
children.
for
for children.
children. Yes.
Right now, we have a very good mix, and I'm so proud and happy to have Liza, Frederick, and Zara here. So we have reading experts, we have authors, we have illustrators, and let's just start to. I think we've done some introduction. We can sing it what we want to tell later. Later. Just want to give a shout out also to our international audience. Recently, we have been having we had audience from Indonesia, from Peru, from Chile. So there, good morning to our international audience also. Of course, our audience from the different parts of the Philippines. First things first, and I just want to start the discussion with this question. We hear about online distance learning. It caused a lot of how do you call that? Issues, quote and unquote, fear, anxiety among teachers, even school leaders. Just to be honest, also, we parents and even students, when they heard that maybe we're going to use online distance learning. Of course, we had some clarifications that it's not just online distance learning. I think because a lot of people were so focused into it, right? I think the unnecessary message was spread out. I don't know whom to blame, social media or whatever. What we're trying to clarify right now, that it's not only online distance learning. But then what happened was that people were so focused, educators were so focused on learning ICT, creation of video materials, that we forgot that we have, well, initially this was my thought, that we have forgotten of the other modalities. And in the other modalities, text-based resources play a very, very important role. But then Mr. Perez reminded me that, hey, it's not just in those areas, even in digital online, text-based resources are very, very important. They're essential. So let's start with this first question, the first question. What does it mean to effectively design or even use a text-based learning resource in distance education? So maybe we can start with Mr. Perez, our reading expert.
What does it mean to develop a text-based learning curriculum, for example? In my opinion, I have been in touch with some public school teachers before this episode. I would like to give a shout out to the public school teachers I have gone in contact with uh, before this episode from Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. I was really very appreciative of what they contribute to the learning of the Filipino children. So most of our public school teachers actually still rely on actual printed texts, but they will be delivered in different ways. So, in my opinion, what is most important now, if there is no available printer or there are no available computers, maybe it would be good for us to think about the different forms of texts in delivering teaching and learning. So, of course, you have the textbook. If your area is not on strict lockdown, maybe the schools or the local government units can deliver the text. And but if the worst case scenario for me is that we have to rely on texts which are available at home and also text around the neighborhood. So I'm thinking not only about labels of canned sardines or and then manuals at home. So those things may be used as texts in developing learning. We can also rely on local texts, text available in your province, in your town, your local history, all those things. So that's what I have to say at the moment.
So, Mr. Perez, just to like put together, what you're saying is that effective use of text-based learning is simply not looking at the text that we usually have, but looking at the context of the students and maybe using those texts that are within their, how do you call that, environment. I love,
Yeah.
for example, that you mentioned about the canned goods, or maybe the nutritional facts behind I don't know, whatever product, because I've seen other subjects like in math and science actually make use of those things. And it's very much in the environment of the students. A lot of texts, we will go back to Mr. Perez's thoughts later, because I want to dig deeper on how he wants us to make use of the different texts around us. This is just an introductory, picking of brains. Yeah. Let's go to Zara. Zara, as a children's book writer, what does it mean? Maybe if you could contextualize now text-based learning, maybe for stories.
Yeah, well, Jim, I think we should all begin with understanding who the child reader is, who the learner is. who are the students who will engage in the text? It's very important that we see a relationship between the reader and the text. So if you're creating a text, if you're creating content, if you're creating art or visuals for the reading child, I think it's important that you consider the developmental stages of reading, the social emotional learning, and yes, the context that the child is in. So we have a different demographic if we are going to teach kids who are in the urban areas. The context of children living in the provinces are also different. Take, for example, the book I wrote for Lampara Books. It's a series of early reader literacy skills program. We have 12 books in that kindergarten series. And when I ask a co-author, I mean an author friend to read the text and look at the visuals, according to that friend of mine, were fine. But he openly told me, Miss Zara, I don't think that our indigenous groups or our kids in the rural areas will automatically understand all of these stories. These stories that you have written will hit it big in big schools, Catholic schools, even private schools in the metro. So now what do I do? So I have to go back to that early grade series and see what what changes we can make, no? Given the situation that we would like to reach all children of all ages and all background. So going back to that question, how can you effectively create a text or a book for children? Then look at the child reader first and foremost. And I would like to say that if you are going to create books for children or text for children, visuals are just as important. So you look at the book also as a technology, you look at the text there and the visuals and the marriage of these two fantastic things, and there you can actually create something beautiful for children.
All right. Fantastic answer, Zara. And you've done a very good segue for illustrations and arts. For Liza,
Thank you,
Liza,
Saja.
we speak about Liza, right, Liza? We
Yes,
speak of text-based learning resources, and we always think of words. But then Zara
yes.
also ushered in the idea that visuals, text visuals, and illustrations actually help. We know that a lot of teachers are writing their own stories. For
Mhm.
example, for mother tongue based learning, I know for a fact that in Abra, because my nephew studies in a public school in Abra, and they have books in Ilocano.
Mhm.
He's in grade 1, or I think incoming grade 2, and they're doing mother tongue based. I've seen some illustrations there, and it helps. Liza, what can you say about adding in visuals? Like, what does it mean to effectively add in visuals?
Actually, I'd like to start about a misconception about illustrations or visuals, that they are just decoration, and they just add clarity to the text. But if you look at visuals or pictures, they are valuable in itself without even before you read the text. Um, if you give a child, for example, a wordless picture book, um, he would have to figure out what's happening in each picture and try to piece the pieces together. And then when they start to enjoy looking at a wordless picture book and start talking about it, telling their own story, it becomes verbal because they have to tell it. So sometimes we forget that visuals are also can tell stories in themselves. Um, and then when you add text to it, then it amplifies the text, and the text amplifies the illustration. So even without text, you can look at your surroundings and put together your own stories. So I remember one of the activities that we did for Ink. We had a series, we illustrated different objects on stones. So we call these story stones. And then we gave this to children in different schools and asked them make stories out of the pictures that we made. And we turned out, we came up with hundreds of stories from different children. So pictures help children understand their world better, and it opens up their imagination. Um, there. so so
Liza,
it's
Liza,
really a
that's a
tool.
one. Yeah, I think you've brought in a very. I think this is an eye-opening of thought. We always see illustration as secondary.
Yes.
'Di ba? I think that's the misconception because even some of the teachers that I know would always start with writing the text and then they would say,
Mhm.
illustrations will come after. But your example a while ago, you started with illustrations of pictures, visuals, and from there you can create a story. They How do you call that? They complement. They are complementary to each other in a sense. Mr. Perez, I want to I will throw the next question at you. This is coming from Liza and Zara's answer. As a reading expert, reading teacher, you're a reading teacher, you're a reading expert. How what I'm trying to process this because this is just a new idea that came out. Um, what How should teachers then understand text and visuals, right? For example, are there reading strategies or approaches that may look first at the visual and illustration before going to the text, or should they go first with the text and then illustration? Given that Zara and Liza said that they're equally important.
I would like to piggyback on what Sarah said that the text and the illustrations are actually are equal, because we have some wordless picture books, and from there, uh, if I'm a parent or a teacher, I will uh, elicit the story from the children. So that's one possibility. So which tells us that um, illustrations, pictures, sceneries can actually create stories. In fact, when you look at your window, there's a story. So
Mhm.
our sense of sight gives us a story. A story, for example, if you're Zara, who's married, for example, by just reading the wrinkles of her husband's her husband's face, she can create a story if the husband is angry or sad. So visuals are very important.
I'm the one
They-
happy and he's married.
in fact, for struggling readers, we have during reading intervention, we don't show them immediately stories with text. We show them frames, and we ask them to make a story out of the frames. So even if a child cannot read the words, actually the child is capable of comprehension based on
Mhm.
what he sees. So that's the importance now of visuals. For texts are processed more in a more complex way because you need to have phonics, phonemic awareness. You have to be able to sound words, and that involves sight. That involves other skills. So if you have good visuals and an equally excellent text, then I don't know, there will be more um, portals for learning. So I support both visual and text. Yeah. I hope I answered you. It's a very difficult question.
Yeah, it is. It is. I Sorry, can you still hear me? My
Yes.
here. Yeah,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
that's good. I think it is because it is very helpful because I think this is the first thing. I myself would even like I think because that's how I don't know how I was trained before. I look at I think it's because when you become older, 'di ba? When you become older, less and less visual are in the books that we
Yeah.
read, right? That we
We
Yes.
just
forget
want to
about
know
the
the ending
visual.
of the story.
Yeah, yeah. Or just the cover. Just the cover. The visual is just
Yeah.
the cover. And then, but if you look at, the children's stories, you see a lot of visuals. I think maybe developmentally, um, that's that is being considered. But I also love the idea that maybe we just need to put back more visuals, because right now, digital text, social media, it's easier now to put a lot of text. And sometimes one of our participants said, a picture paints or tells a story, or it paints 1,000 words or whatever. It's, I think digital literacy, Mr. Perez mentioned this a while before in our podcast. Literacy is not just anymore just reading, and writing. It's digital literacy, viewing. And I think we need to bring out more literacy skills in understanding not just the text, but even the visual. But then we also have the problem with reading, with the challenge in reading that we have right now. So I think these are the two fronts that we need to further focus on as educators. Um, for Zara and Frederick, and Liza, if you could also share in your thoughts. 2 weeks ago, we had a session on storytelling. So, I had my friends from Mexico and Canada who have written a book titled "Hope, Where Are You," which my friend and I co-translated into Filipino. And then we talk about storytelling as a means to coping with the pandemic. Let's dig in further to this kind of understanding. Short stories. Zara and Mr. Perez, how can teachers take advantage of them further? Not just to, it's important that we use stories for coping with the pandemic, but let's look at the front of of literacy, right, of reading. How can we further maximize stories? Some tips or strategies from you?
Sarah first.
Well, I always believe in the literature-based approach that the stories we use for teaching and learning, the stories are a wealth of learning and insight. I don't call it morals because I think every one of us, we have morals, no? So I'd rather look at stories as points for taking in life lessons. And since I believe in the literature based approach, I always follow a strategy when I do storytelling sessions and when I'm in the library to always create a pre reading session, a during reading session, and a post reading session. So, my pre reading when I do storytelling, especially in the library for young kids, would always be hooked in the story. A simple explanation or showing of the title and asking children what do they think the title is all about, or what the cover tells them, uh, what what the story is going to be. And then we move on to a during reading experience where a lot of questions can now be facilitated by the teacher. And it's fascinating because in a during reading experience, it's when a storyteller, a teacher, a librarian, or even a parent can actually model the reading habit, where the storyteller can ask questions aloud, and this would prompt the children listening to think, oh, so reading and experiencing a story can actually happen all at the same time, and my thoughts are activated when I'm into this reading experience. And then for the post reading experience, sometimes we do activities like games and songs. So this entire process of introducing the story, introducing the book, showcasing the illustrations, and thinking through each event, each sequence in a story, and then ending it nicely with a song, a game, or a talk about important parts in the story is in itself a way to effectively use uh, a story. And it can also be used in digital formats. You can create your Zoom or your videos with your stories shown on the screen and with you in that little inbox, and still follow through that simple methodology. So that's me as a school librarian, and I suppose the reading teacher can expound on more creative strategy. But before I go to Eric, I'd like to mention that those story stones that ang ink put together, that's a very authentic and organic way to use not just text but illustrations and visuals. Oh, imagine sa bato, no, in a stone, you can draw and put stories together. That's very natural. So if you don't have your internet Wi-Fi at home, if you only have your surroundings, you have leaves, you have rocks, and you have all this natural environment around you, you can make use of that to create stories. So there.
Sarah, Mr. Perez, maybe some reading strategies. I heard of Sarah mentioning, and there's another comment here involving parents, especially for the young learners. We're now bringing in auditory component. So when they listen to someone who's reading to them, that's very, very important. Mr. Perez, maybe some strategies like we're always you're the reading expert here. And I've observed a lot of reading teachers. They don't simply dive to the text, right? There are some reading strategies even before reading and even after reading or even during reading. What are your, I don't know, maybe the best practices that you have done or approaches from your experience?
In schools, I follow what Sarah says about literature-based programs. So before we read, we activate prior knowledge. That's based on the schema theory, activating prior knowledge. Because when you active, our brains are wired in such a way that synapses are produced when we make connections. So we cannot just say and go to our classroom and say, this is the story written by Eric Carle, and that we start with the author. No, it's better that we really think about the story and connect the story to the previous or the prior knowledge of students. That's very basic and important. Because, for example, when you choose a reading material for kids, in storytelling, even at home, the student should have a prior knowledge about the topic. For example, can I mention titles of stories? There are stories like, Bakit Matagal Ang Sundo Ko? No? If you do this in Metro Manila, where they have bus services, school services, or even they have their own cars, that would be relevant for them. But if you tell the story in Bukidnon, the children in Bukidnon, they don't have fetchers or sundo. So if you choose that story for your class, maybe 200% of your lesson has been lost already because it's not related to their experience. So very, very important, the most important thing is the experience, the prior knowledge of the students about the story. Even if they cannot read the words, the context, the life connected to the story is very important. So that's for schools. And then after reading, for example, you can connect the story uh, through enrichment, connecting it to the TV shows they have seen, to the stories of their parents. That's what we call making connections. This is a skill which I think teachers should realize. I'm what do you call that? It's something I really fight for because teachers only focus on details, noting details, cause and effect. This may be found in the text. We have to look for other means. We have to develop the students' thinking while reading because they think first before they read. So that's for schools. In families, I think it's important also that when we tell stories, we bring companionship as a tool. We read with our children. We share with them our stories related to these stories. We connect with them. So it means in family reading time, you connect not only to the text, you also connect to your loved one.
Mr. Yes, Zara.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. I just like to add because we've been talking about the relevance of the child's experience, especially if the child will read or encounter a text. But there's also an aspect of stories and books that we have to consider. That when we open a book, we also open another world, like a different world from that of the reader, a different worldview because the writer is also presenting his or her worldview, and the same with the author, no, the illustrator. It's really a fantastic interaction. But we go back to the formal teaching of reading skills and comprehension. That when we introduce a book that has a different context or worldview or another world for that matter to a child, then the teaching strategies must be set in place. So there should be a careful study of the literature. There needs to be a planning of the teaching of this material. And yeah, bottom line really is, how do you want your child to understand, to comprehend, and enjoy the story or the book?
So I totally agree with Sarah. No, so uh, it's important also to consider the environment of the students. That's the very context. And then um, what I want to say also is that in the selection of text, we really have to be discerning and not just rely on the curriculum guide passed on to us by the department. Because if you're in Surigao, there are things you cannot teach, which is based on the curriculum guide made by people in Metro Manila or the National Capital Region. So for DepEd teachers especially, we have to be very discerning in terms of our following the curriculum guide. That's it.
Mr. Perez, I think very important. I think you, Zara, and you mentioned about the formal structures of reading being in place, the strategies. I think this has been one of the major concerns because, sabi nga ni Mr. Perez, it's always about noting details, right? What what's happening in the text, the details, who did this, who did that, right? I think that's the usual way because I'm pretty sure some educators just throw in the text, read this. Why am I mentioning this? Because a lot of teachers right now are creating independent learning modules, right? And
Mhm.
it will be very very hard for a lot of students who are learning on their own to just simply read the text without the structures. So thank you for mentioning that maybe in the modules itself, hindi lang siya, it's the modules are not just list of what you need to do, what you need to read, right? And then you do some practice test. Maybe we can put in, I don't know if you would, I don't know if these are the best examples, you can correct me. KWL, or maybe the visible thinking routines, right? See, think, wonder. That's my favorite part. Even in CLE class, in the Christian life education, before we even read the story, we look at Bible story illustrations. You know, before they dive in, and then we do the visible thinking routine strategy like see, think, wonder. What do you see in the picture, in the cover of the book? What are you thinking about it? What are you wondering about what's gonna happen? So I don't know if those are perfect examples, but I'm just coming in from my experience in the classroom, right? So I think that's the main agenda why we're talking about reading strategies, because it can be very challenging. Again, self independent learning. Can you imagine also if parents are not trained? Maybe that's one thing that we could look into before we dive in into learning, distance learning. Maybe there's an orientation or maybe a help maybe for parents, right? So wonderful answers, Mr. Perez and Zara, on this one. I'm gonna go to the next part now. A very hot topic recently: copyright materials. Copyright. This Zara or and Liza, maybe this is your field in terms, since you have published your own books and illustrated some books. Can you tell us what teachers need to remember when using books, children's books, or other whatever materials that are under copyright? laws. Maybe you could speak about Creative Commons or public domains, things like that. So
Yeah,
whoever goes
yeah. I'll,
first.
I'll just I'll just say that when we speak of copyright, we have to remember it's also about human rights. It's also about economic rights and also our moral rights. That's why there's a law. There's a Republic Act for that under the intellectual property rights. I think no, we have to check. But my recent research also prompted me to look at fair use and the moral implications of using text-based resources in teaching. When we speak of copyright, it's always a deal, no? It's always an act of asking courtesy and respect to the creators of the content, the art, or whatever form of material you're using in the classroom. So yeah, there should always be permission to ask the creators, the author, the illustrator, the publisher. There should also be observance of citations and attribution. Always show your intent. Why are you using this material and for what purpose? Please do not claim it as your own. So the most you can do is to cite your source in your PowerPoint, in your worksheet, and create your own list of references. And I think this is where your school librarians can help you, or your online librarians are available to assist you with such nitty-gritty details. No, I myself would ask librarians to help me when I create a book. So yeah, for Creative Commons, I think this is part of web content creation. I'm also a blogger, so I make use of that Creative Commons license. You can share my content, what I put there in the blog, but you can also please attribute your source. No, so there's a whole philosophy and principle behind intellectual property rights, copyright, and Creative Commons. But I think the bottom line really is for us to observe courtesy. We have to
Yeah,
respect the
it's about
artist.
respect.
Yes, who put in a sliver of their soul into what they have created. And for teachers, you also do this when you create your lesson plans. You put in a lot of thought, diba? When creating your lesson plans. So, yeah, I think we have to bring that back. Copyright is about human rights, it's about our economic rights, and it's about
Yes.
our moral rights.
Liza,
Yes. I guess for copyright, the bottom line is, if when in doubt, just ask. Ask the publisher if you can use the material. Ask the writer. Ask the illustrator. If it's for educational use, most often than not, they will agree for, as long as you're not going to sell the material you're using. Most likely, they'll agree to for you to use them. So, as Zara mentioned, it's about respecting each other's intellectual property.
Liza and Zara, there are questions here. I think it's teachers would like to know: are there like websites where they can go to, like to look for free content, or do we want to ask the teachers also maybe try an extra mile? The extra mile would be contacting the authors.
Yeah, I always advise teachers to look for what's free online. And if they find material that is under the public domain, then they can use that. If it's a folk story or a folk song, then they have to look at 3 or 5 versions of that folk literature before they can retell or use it in the classroom. No, what sources are free right now? I think to mention a few, no, our local publishers are offering some of their ebooks for free in a particular time lang. No, let's say Buri Books. I think
Mm-mm.
they're offering a 1 month free access to their books. No, that's one. Second,
Mm-hmm.
archive.org or Internet Archive has free materials. And there are books also that this Internet Archive agreed to with publishers. So you can borrow it online if you have access to
Mm-hmm.
it. to these resources. And of course, Project Gutenberg. Oh, I love Project Gutenberg. You can get so much free material from Project Gutenberg and in different formats pa. EPUB, HTML, PDF, di ba? Ang saya-saya. Canvas, Jigo Alampay, hello if you're
Yeah.
listening. Canvas has free stories and free artworks, but it's
Yeah.
also
All of
protect.
their stories are free.
Yeah, 'di ba? Galing, no? So, I think another challenge for us educators, no, or here creating content for children is to really pull our resources together. And I think you need to tap, no, people in your learning community who can do this for you. Like teachers, you will always teach. Yun talaga yung role nyo, no? But there are other support systems in your learning community who can help you create content for what's free out there, who can create a directory of publishers. And now that everything's online, for us who are lucky to have internet connection, we can always check Adarna, Lampara, Hiyas, Anvil, even our friends in Ang-Ik or Rap. So I think what we need to do is to come up with a concerted effort to help each other. So if there's no public domain, if you've exhausted all your efforts, then go ask. Dear Miss Liza, can I use your illustration as cover for my FB page? Mga ganyan. So yeah, we have to make connections and linkages for this matter.
Just to share my favorite website, it's Pixabay.
Yeah.
It's where I look for pictures, illustrations, vectors. Google Images also has the tool. You can look for free to use for redistribution with modification. I think that is something that they can look into. For those looking for illustrations, Liza, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But Creative Commons, especially for images and illustrations, are the way to go. If you're not good in art,
Yes, you have
I'm not
to.
good in art,
Yeah.
so that's my way to go. Liza?
You have to check the images before you use or share them. So usually naman it's written if it's free for public use, for educational purposes only, for personal use only. So you just be mindful about the what's included in the illustration.
I think it's just very tricky, no? It's a very tricky
Yeah.
part, but I think the more important thing to do, if you're in doubt, ask, right?
Ask.
Because usually the information of the one who took the picture or maybe drawn it or maybe wrote it, usually the information is there. It's come on, it's digital. Sending a message is just,
Yeah.
I don't know, some clicks or types away, right? So that's one thing that I have in mind. Yeah, I think, yeah, Zara.
Yeah, I think it's also helpful if teachers are able to document what they created on their own, and that can
Yes.
actually fall into their own copyright. Sa kanila din yon, 'di ba? If they wrote something, if they draw something, then they have to document it. They need to create their own portfolio. So if you have a learning
Mhm.
portfolio of your lesson plans, your learning materials, and what you created, then you can also share that with others with the provision that you're sharing it for educational purposes and that as a teacher you want to develop a professional learning community, then your resources that you created, dear teacher, becomes now what? There in the digital commons. So it's something that you share with another professional. But
Yeah.
document the source, the time you created, the date. Those are
Yeah.
very important. The nitty-gritty, no? We think those details don't matter, but you created that in this school year. Diba? What's the context of that school year? And your school helped you publish your brochure, your learning guide. That's also your own. You have intellectual property for for that module or for that
Yeah,
learning
true.
material.
Um, there's a comment here, Danilo. I want to just pick this up, and this is very, very important. Danilo Byland says educators need to form communities to help them curate materials for specific topic grade levels. I think this is very, very important, and
Yes.
that is what we mean by commons. The idea of commons, Creative Commons. You have DepEd Commons in Xavier School. We just launched the Learning Magis Learning Commons. I know that CHED has its own version of learning free learning resources materials. They just have to they were greatly curated. UP Open University, UP has. I think it's Danilo's correct. We need to form communities. We need to bring in, collaborate, put in together our effort. But very important, quality assurance. Some of the people, some of
Yeah.
the comments here are telling us that it's not just putting together. So
Yeah.
there should be a
Mhm.
mechanism of quality assurance, because when we curate materials, we're telling them that, hey, these are the best materials. We're
Mhm.
saving you time. We're
Mhm.
categorizing everything according to your topics or needs, but we are actually reading them. I think that's very, very important. We need to know,
Yes.
to read. At least naman we
Yes.
know, right? At least we
Also,
know.
it's not
Yeah.
just simply putting a list of resources together, diba? There's a selection process. There's a criteria. We're informed of learning goals, perhaps objectives, or yeah, the child reader who will encounter the text or the learning material.
All right. So next part for Liza and Mr. Perez, Frederick. Let's now we talked about illustrations a while ago, but let us expand the
Mhm.
idea of illustrations. We have diagrams in text, right? Um, Drawings,
Yeah.
flow charts, all those kinds of things. Um, Liza, in terms of creating this kind of materials, you spoke a while ago, but I want to know more. How can teachers take advantage of this? Is there any other way of like Mr. Perez? This is like media consumption. Maybe is this part under media consumption, like illustrations, things that you see. Right? How do we further take advantage of this as teachers? Again, strategies, maybe.
Start.
Liza?
Okay. Illustrations or visuals can serve two purposes. It could be for information, or it could be for pleasure or for um, entertainment of the child. So, like stories, we talk about picture books. Um, I think teachers can help the child process the images guiding them on how to look at pictures. So if you talk about comprehension about reading visuals, you could first ask them about identifying what they see. So that's the most basic part. It's just identifying what do you see on the page, and then help them figure out what's happening. Then you could ask them, what does this make you think about? Help them connect the pictures with each other, connect the pictures with the text, and then ask them how they feel about it. So, as a teacher or as a parent, you could help guide your the reader on how to see, and then later you could further process this and help them evaluate everything what they see, what they feel, and relate it to their world. So those are basic questions that the teacher can or the parent can do to help the child process the visuals. And then on
All
the
right.
other end, for graphics, it's a very different thing. If you talk about graphs and um, um, graphs and infographics, these are all about illustrations to explain. So drawing to explain things. So if you look up at a pie graph, it's easier to process data. So it's a very different thing from looking at pictures in a picture book. And the purpose is also very different. So as an illustrator, as a designer, you have to make a distinction on what the purpose of your material would be. Do you want it to tell a story or do you want it to parang straight out inform? So I think that's the balance of creating visuals.
Thank you,
Is that
Liza.
clear?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's very
Yes,
clear.
yes, it's good.
You
Yeah.
brought in the basic principles, right?
Mm-hmm.
On how to understand text. Mr. Perez, Mr.
Oh,
Perez, I,
I agree with what Liza said. Because, for example, in international assessments, reading is not only relegated to reading text. and stories. In fact, most of international assessments deal with a lot of informational texts. And sometimes their test samples show only graphs, only simple flow charts. And that is considered as reading. So I think we have to give prime to visuals. Because as I had mentioned, with the example of the wrinkled forehead of Sarah's husband, reading actually from the very start begins with the awakening of the sense of sight. I'm not a developmental pediatrician. I'm not a father. I'm just a reading advocate and teacher. But when parents tell me, those who would like to enroll in kindergarten or nursery, they tell me, does my child need to write or read already? I tell the parent or the parents that you have to give your child first a sense of awe and wonder,
Yeah.
the sense of the beautiful. I'm not an advocate of Imelda Marcos, but a sense of what's beautiful. Um, a sense of, for me, the most important thing is not to teach a child how to hold a pencil, but how to help the child how to appreciate colors.
Yeah.
Mm.
Because that's the first form of reading in the in our studies in the psychology of reading. Looking, watching birds, watching the green bamboo trees in front of me. That is the start of reading. So colors are very important. So visuals and
I
other
think that's
things.
the reason why advertising. I think
Yes,
that's the reason why
Liza?
advertisers or print ads use a lot of photos because they attract the reader. And so the same way that books attract the young reader, um, it makes them enjoy the reading process because it arouses something in the child.
So maybe that's one principle, Liza, and our guests would want to tell our teachers. Think as if you are advertising something and you want to put their attention. I think that's a very good principle because in distance education we have what we call the guided didactic conversation that all the learning resources becomes they become an extension of the teacher. The teacher is not there, but the teaching presence should be there. So all of your materials, whether it's learning management system, whether it's a printed module, it becomes an extension of your presence as a teacher. So I think this is just what I want to put to add in terms of our discussion because it has been very fruitful. Even our teacher, our participants are bringing in a lot of their insights right now when we create our modules or resources, whether online, offline, whether it's text, it's visual, or video materials, because even video materials, you make use of visuals and text. We need to make sure that we really engage the students, and that it's as if they hear us teaching, speaking through the materials. I think this is very, very important. That's the basic idea, actually, of the guided didactic conversation. It's a theory, by the way, in distance education, one of the core principles. So wonderful insights. Zara, you were raising your hand.
Yeah, because you mentioned that that is it a technique, the guided didactic um
Theory.
it's a
Quote
theory.
unquote. So it's a way of doing things. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd also like to add that language also matters and point of view. That
Yes, yes.
when you write expository text or informative text, you present it in a conversation, like you're
Mm,
talking to your reader, whether it's a child or a teacher. Um, it's important that you address that person or that reader in a personal way. You may be narrating the water cycle, but it's in such a way that you're showing the process, and your point of view is that of like a storyteller, no, that you would like the reader to be engaged in it. So first person, yes, and yeah, for fiction is it's I think it's important that we also look at the character development of our of our characters, whether it's a hero or an anti-hero or the villain. So language matters a lot and point of view.
All right. Thank you, Zara. Again, that's an additional thought. When you mention about language and the words that are being used, I don't know. Maybe we can challenge our teachers who are creating the modules. Because if you look at modules right now, it's as if they're very impersonal, right? It's as if do this, do that, do that. It's always like it's a very third. I don't know. Third. How do you call that? Objective point of view. Tama ba? Person point of view. Third person point of view. Na it's very distant, right? And one thing that I've learned, and this might be very very helpful, especially for the young learners, when you create modules in distance education, in remote learning, it's as if really that you are talking to them, right? So that's how they are formulating the learning packets. That's how they are designing. It's as if you are. If you could remember I remember before that I had books that the book really addresses me. It's as if the book is reading to me. Maybe that's one challenge that we can do with the modules that we have right now, especially for those in the younger years. Maybe the modules should actually address, right, the one who's reading it, even if they are doing some worksheets. It's as if they can hear the teacher speaking to them. That's basically just the idea. So there, wonderful. I think we have exhausted. Last question, Mr. Perez, but you have already answered this actually in our discussion, like other forms of text. You've mentioned about labels and canned goods, billboards. I don't know, but depende sa context talaga. Like like what you've said, Mr. Perez. For example, the Zara's, for example, a while ago, like text being used in the city that does not make sense in the province. Coming from the province, I would say yes. There was a time before when I watched the TV, television, and all of the stories or even news are all about Metro Manila. I can really relate to that. There are some stories, a lot of stories all about what's happening in the city because they are in the books, textbooks, diba? That is one that is being published, and that's what we're using. Common, generic textbook. And I think that's the one of the most important thing that we want to do. I mean, it can be very, very costly. It's more cost efficient if there's a similar story. But maybe that's the idea behind the mother tongue. That's why they're asking teachers to create stories that are contextualized in their own culture, because it will really, really speak to them. So there, we're done. Anything else that you want to say? We're done with our discussion. We're gonna dive into some of the questions. So for our participants right now, get ready with your questions. Type in your questions, and then we will try as much as we can to answer some of your thoughts. We have already one question here from Rosemary Parada. I'm gonna serve it right now. Related to copyright, and she really stressed it. Very important, all caps. Okay, so let's read it. What if you created your own resources, yet unpublished, then some other teacher saw and used them and had them published in his or her name? Is there a legal sanction to this? Who should be considered the author, the original creator or the one who had resources published? A very important, I think there is a very simple answer to this. Zara or Liza, would you want to answer this? Would you want to take this?
Well, first of all, I think it's a teacher's responsibility to really document his or her creations. That's one, no? Second, if you made something, ownership mo na yon. It's
Yes.
yours. It's yours already, no? If we go to legal speak, it's going to be messy. It's going to be very 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 tricky, no? If you want to run after the teacher, then I think you have to talk it out. I've been blogging for I started blogging in 2005, and in the early years I had cases of an informative article on information literacy copy pasted in another blog. So
Oh
I had to
no.
run. Yeah, I had to run after that student, and because he is a student, so I'm more kind to that student. And
Yeah.
I think the student has to learn. Now, for the co-teacher, I think you also need to talk this through. So you have to document your own creation. You own your materials, but in your learning community, you also need to come up with agreements like this. So we have to be
Yeah.
proactive. We should not be reactive. And then at the back end, or we should wrap around our concept of creation and ownership with the law. Okay, so
Yeah.
the school leaders should also take an active part on this concern. Now that we're creating materials and we put it online, how are our school leaders creating also an environment, a system that will protect the rights of our teachers and it's agreeable to share? So again, no, we have the administration, the school leaders, creating a system that we can say that the teachers are following, hindi pasaway ang mga teachers natin because our leaders have created a system that's efficient and competent enough to bring out the best in our
Yeah.
teachers. So in terms of
Yeah.
copyright, this is my appeal to school leaders. Please also secure the safety of your teachers when it comes to their ownership. So si teacher na nagtanong about it, you review, no? You talk muna to the teacher. Maybe the teacher doesn't know that, di ba? Ganun pala yon. Again, the intent. Are you in good faith? Why did you put
Yeah.
your name there? It's going to be an entire different process if you want to go legal.
Yeah. My I have a friend who's a lawyer who said to me that because I was writing a lot of things, he asked me if I'm trying to, I don't know, registered it like trademark or something like empowerED, for example. Have I registered this as trademark? And then I was like, I don't want to undergo those processes. I don't have time. I'm a busy teacher. Teachers are so busy. No, but and then I asked him, what if other people make use of this? And then he just, or the materials that I've written or things that I've done, he just said that number one, ownership is innate. Once you have created this, it's you who's the creator. However, you need to make sure that you have evidence that you are the creator. Because in the court, magiging ano lang yan, he said, she said. And
Yeah,
hindi matatapos
yeah,
yan. So we need
yeah,
evidence. I think that's what Zarah is mentioning a while ago.
yes,
You need to secure your document. For example, if you're typing in Word, your word system has records, right? When you have written it. However, you can trick that because your computer can change the date. So it's very, very important that you have a way. You can challenge each other. Sige nga, can you show me your draft or whatever? It's easy to do that, but in the end, it will boil down to, I think, to the legal matters, documentation. I think this is more challenging also for illustrations. I think it's the same challenge for arts. We have a question here, Liza, about drawings, for example. Can they use and then attribute and then claim it at their own and then print it? What is the extent of is there a way, maybe is there a way, like, I don't know, a way really to ask for, is it enough to just say, as I would like to use this, or we need to be more specific with how are we going to use it, when are we going to use it, and in what form?
Yes, you can definitely, you can't use it as your own. You have to ask permission from, actually for picture books, you have to ask permission from three people: the publisher, the writer, and the illustrator, because it's a shared copyright when it's in a book form. Um, because, for example, Chenilyn, the name Chenilyn came from the writer, but the image of Chenilyn came from me. And then the publisher is the one who put it out in the world. So we own the rights to that one character. So very important that you credit all three and ask permission from all three. What was the
I
This
think
other
is
question?
this is from Therese actually.
Mhm.
Can we do something in terms of copyright if someone modifies or alter your illustration?
You also have to ask permission, but if you're going to use it in a classroom setting and you ask your maybe students to draw, that's fine. Because it's just one part of the whole book. But if you're
Yeah.
going to make a a copy of that illustration and then start selling it, then that's it's a different matter. If you
Okay.
start making notebooks, for example, with the
Yeah.
characters from books, that's different.
Yeah, I think this is what Danilo has mentioning. Are they profiting from the use of the materials? I mean,
Yeah.
that's one thing that is not allowed anymore, right? To take profit of the materials, then you have actually um, borrowed or asked permission from. So
Yeah.
it's not I know. Um,
Actually, a tricky thing is parang uso ngayon is the fan art. Is fan art.
Fan
That
art.
part is,
Yeah. Fan
yeah,
art
that's
and
the
fan
tricky
fiction.
part. Yes.
Okay. As
So,
long as you're profiting from it. I know that because
Mm.
I'm a fan of one K-pop group. Okay, there are a lot of fan art. I'm a BTS fan, but there are a lot of fan arts being done, and they're
yeah.
selling merchandise. And
Mm.
there's actually a process that you need to ask permission. They're not
Mm-mm.
saying that you cannot make products, but we have to make sure that it's undergoing proper process, something like that. A tricky. I don't know if we can handle this question, but I'm not quite sure. I just want to be honest. Maybe we need to consult our lawyer friends. Fair use
Yeah.
policy in education. Danilo's mentioning if it's used in an educational context, then it's not an issue of copyright as long as attribution is given.
Yeah. That's true.
However, what if there is a profit? Like for example, they're
Ah,
using it in their modules, printing it and selling it
yes.
because there are some schools who do that. I don't know. There are some schools, quote unquote, some schools now. This is one of the issues. They take in pictures, they create learning packages, and then the pictures there are actually from other people, and then they make profit. So I think it's very tricky. We need to be very very specific with our issues and example. 'Di ba? Kasi in my friend told me, like for example, I asked my lawyer friend. He was like, "What if this?" And he asked further questions.
Yeah.
Did he ask
Yeah.
permission? Did you give permission? What was the extent of the permission? So again, it's not a very simple thing. I think
Mhm.
maybe I do remember that there are like notice of like a permission or an agreement. Maybe you can, I don't know if there are templates actually in
Yes.
online that you can
Yes.
download. It's a
Yeah.
permission. I don't know what's the proper term for that, but it's like an
Yeah. Yeah.
agreement, terms of agreement.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, Jim, many university websites or many academic sites would have that clause that before
Mm.
they download this material, they have to email this and that and tell them where it is going to be used. And then sometimes they would reply, you can use everything because your purpose is for this, or you can just use 50% of this paper because you will be distributing to a bigger audience. So we really need to be careful, no? We have to read all of these little clauses. It's always in the home page or in the about page of the websites we use for sourcing or for our resources.
All right. I think the basic idea that we have right now is if in doubt, ask. Right?
Yeah, and
Right? If
I
in
think
doubt.
we have to also bring in our lawyer friends, no, in the discussion of copyright and IPO. In fact, there was yesterday at 1:30 p.m. there was a webinar by the Central Philippines University, and they had three guests. There's a librarian there. There was a lawyer there who discussed use of information and copyright for teaching materials. So yeah, maybe you can also check that out in Facebook, or maybe after this discussion we can share the infographic because I think it's a recorded video and you can still watch it in your own free time.
Yeah, Sheila, one of our viewers, put in a very wonderful idea that I also wanted to mention. Just because it's in Google doesn't mean that it's free to use. Right? Parang ganun eh. Sometimes I cringe. Sorry, very the cringe. I cringe when I see illustration and then attribution google.com. Mali
Yeah.
po yun ha. Mali po yun. We're telling everyone already. Mali po yun. That's not a correct attribution. Picture, PowerPoint presentation, picture, tas nasa baba, google.com. You cannot do that. That's not the proper way of attribution. Okay.
Yes.
Also, maybe this is one opportunity that I would like to take advantage. This is the reason why some speakers do not want to give PowerPoint presentations,
Yeah.
copies of their slides. I just
Mm-mm.
want to be honest. I've never brought this out, but I'm just going to use this as an example. A friend of mine sent to me like a picture of my slides being used by another speaker who attended in my session, right? It doesn't really matter to me because my slides are, wala kang makikita sa slides ko, basic ideas. Di ba? One-liner. If there's a picture, it's there because it's very, very important. But then, this is one reason why some speakers, it's not that nagdadamot sila, right? It's not because nagdadamot. It's not because they don't want to share it. They don't want to share it because some people do not even give them proper attribution, right? And I've heard a lot of horror stories right now. There are a lot of webinars, workshops, and some of my speaker friends were like, one of them asked for a copy, and then we thought that it's for private consumption. What they did was to actually use it in their own workshops, right? No, we don't do that. We don't do that because even speakers, even everyone is a creator of something. And the basic principle is let's ask permission. If it's given, maybe it's because it's for private use, private consumption. Not
And
not for I know, right?
yeah, yeah, and Jim, it will also help kasi I've also get invitations, no? I've been invited to webinars also, and if the organization could not send me an agreement, no, or a term of conditions where the material is going to be used, if it's for free, if the entire thing will be put on online, I ask that I'm going to
Yeah,
share what. Yeah, I think that's good practice. We have to be transparent about it. So an organization inviting a speaker should also be responsible to the invited speaker to present a term, no, and come up with an agreement that, yeah, I'm comfortable to share my PowerPoint and you can use it in other means as long as you attribute. So yeah,
yeah,
I think the good thing about this discussion is it's out in the open now, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to look out for each other and help each other
true.
to be more aware, no, of our creative rights, our basic human rights of creation.
Two questions before we proceed to the. I have three questions here. Mr. Perez, maybe you can already see Rosemary's question. I
Yes.
think this is something that you can answer. But I just want to address some questions right now. Anna Avila says, how about the images uploaded in Google? Can we use it? Not all. Not all. Remember, there's a tool. Search for this. Copyright tools when you're searching in Google. When you scroll down in Google, there's an additional tool there that lets you see which images can be used, can be modified, can be distributed, and can be used for profit. Right? So Anna and the other teachers there, you need to find this tool. You can search it in Google. Libreng mag-Google ngayon. How to use Google image search for asking or for materials that can be used, images. So there. Second, some lane. This includes something like in-depth ed, and I'm not sure if we can answer this, but I just want to bring in some basic idea. I'm pretty sure that Depth Ed Learning Resource portal or other portals have terms of agreement, right? You need to understand the terms of agreement. For example, if you submitted and uploaded in this portal, whether it's DepEd or other portals, you're actually agreeing already. Sometimes you're agreeing that since this is a commons portal, that means that other people can use it, can modify it if that's part of the agreement, even without asking permission from you. Joining a Creative Commons portal already assumes that you're telling you don't need to ask permission from me, but you just need to attribute it to me. So that when I see it, I know that it's my work. So let's be clear with that, ha. Sometimes joining a portal already assumes, especially if there's a terms of agreement, like in Pixabay, my favorite, Pixabay, free illustrations. I don't need to ask permission. Sometimes may nakalagay lang, why not send a coffee? to the Illustrator. I tried that once. I tried that once. That's my gratitude kasi ang dami ko na nakuhang images. I've gotten a lot of
Wow.
images from Pixabay. And you can give that, but being part of a portal, read the terms of agreement, right? Kasi sometimes they already says we don't need to ask permission anymore because when you join this and uploaded this, they can just remix and reuse it. So very, very important. And also for those creating portals, it's important that you make the terms of agreement visible. Diba? Walang hidden charges, as they say. Right? In life, dapat walang hidden. Right? So, and then Creative Commons, there's a website. You can look at creativecommons.org. It will tell you what licenses are very, very, are some things that you can use. Mr. Perez, I think this is the last questions that we can entertain right now. We're almost going to end. Rosemary Amparado says, this is kind of long. I will read it for you. Should we totally avoid uncontextualized contents in the tertiary level? What about texts about snow, hail, blizzards, or avalanches when we don't have those in the Philippines? But there may be a chance in the future the students will work in places that experience winter. I think the basic idea here is like what I think Zarah mentioned this, but Mr. Perez, maybe you can highlight this further. Um, what do you mean by context? Is it the immediate environment? Is it possible to talk about and experiences that they don't have yet, or realities that they don't have yet, or maybe indirectly? Kasi may reality naman talaga sa like snow. We haven't experienced it lang for some. So, Mr. Perez.
I would like to say something first.
Okay.
Like, I would like to
I,
say something.
this is this is
Mr.
related
Perez,
to what
yeah.
I wanted to say earlier. That
Okay.
they say that stories or books are like windows and doors. So when you read stories, you see yourself like a mirrors. They reflect yourself, or it could also be a window to somebody else's world, or a doorway to somebody else's world. So like stories about snow could teach us about, give us a better understanding of our world, and help us learn about empathy and understanding. Yeah.
Thank you,
So,
Liza. Mr. Perez.
uh, I don't totally say that we should not use, uh, stories which are not related to the context of the students. When I say context of the reader, it includes the immediate context, cultural, social, psycho-emotional, everything in the context of a child. But if, for example, the context of a character like the little match girl is, the psycho-emotional is the same poverty, the same. So that's possible. But what I want to highlight is that uh, we consider first the context, the immediate context. But in cases that, because for example, she's only referring to college, no, but even in the lower grades, we can use our Filipino context and relate it to context of other children. So, for example, you can still ask them to read the story of Mulan because uh, there are stories with universal appeal. For you to be able, so when you say there's universal appeal, the context of the story may be applied to other contexts. But in terms of learning, I would like to focus first on our context. But if you start with a story like The Little Match Girl, you have to do a lot of prepping up, a lot of unlocking, not only in terms of vocabulary, but also in terms of the setting of the story. Because, I cannot say there's a lamppost in Camet, Chile, Doña Remedios Trinidad in Bulacan, no? Meron doon poste. So, kailangan lang, we have to prepare the children for for a better understanding by unlocking the world in which they will enter, as Liza said.
Yeah.
Because there's another world they will have to enter. There's transportative, I invented the word, We transport the children to another world when they read. So yung
Yeah.
bakit matagal ang sundo ko, pwede pa rin namang basahin yun sa Bukidnon if you have provided the context. Pero don't begin with that because they don't have sundo, they don't have fetchers. So that will make them understand children also in the metropolis. In Cagayan de Oro, for example, if they're from Bukidnon. So like that.
Yeah, I think it's really the
Right.
selection of resources, diba? And how your learning goals and objectives meet your choice of learning materials for the child who will read and who will learn from your teaching experience.
Another one,
Yeah.
be sensitive also to the cultural context of the
Yeah.
students. Because, for
Yes,
example, the
yes.
story, Ang Unang Baboy sa Langit, don't teach it in Mindanao. There are Muslims. You know, it's it will hurt their sensibilities. So
Yes, yes.
you have to be very careful.
Mm.
So a lot of responsibilities, like things to consider. That's what makes being an educator fun and exciting, right? That's what I think it's because we're totally evolving the way we understand what it means to become a teacher. I remember before, like
Exactly.
yeah, right. As we further understand, the our society right now makes it very easy to communicate, to deliver information to other people. The world's getting smaller and smaller in some ways because of our connections, global connections, connections in the country. So we now further understand that cultural context matters, the sensibility, appropriateness, all those kinds of things. I think those are very, very important ideas that we have gotten. So I love this discussion. Thank you so much, Liza. I'm taking this opportunity to thank Liza, Zarah, and Frederick. We did not just talk about text-based learning resources anymore. We've actually unpacked, right? Thank you, Liza, for being here. This was a very, and thank you, Zara, for introducing us to Liza. And Mr. Perez for always bringing in the expertise of a reading teacher. Thank you so much. Before we end, just some notes. I'm gonna show a banner right now under our screen. This is the link to evaluation. So while our participants are evaluating, you need to evaluate this to get a certificate of participation. But the form closes after a week. Again, reminder, before you send your information, you need to make sure that you check the spelling of your name, your email, because wrong email means it's not gonna be, when we send the certificate to you, it's gonna bounce back. You won't be able to receive it, and it will be hard for the system to look for it. So the evaluation is there. We're gonna post it also in our Facebook and YouTube channel. And while you're doing that, Zara,
Yes.
time to promote, and maybe Mr.
Thank
Perez
you.
after, and Liza. Yeah, go, Zara.
Yeah. So I would first of all, Jim, thank you for this. Thank you for accommodating us, the PBBY, in your show to talk about creating resources, creating books and stories for children. Because really, from the very beginning, when PBBY was organized, we have the child in mind. We want to create books and stories that children will enjoy first of all, and that they will feel cared for and valued. So every third Tuesday of July, July 21 is the third Tuesday of July this year, we celebrate the National Children's Book Day. At ang tema po ng NCBD ngayong taon ay, sa pagbabasa, hindi ka nag-iisa. In
Yes.
reading, you are not alone. So we have online activities. Yes. Plugged in. This is one of the first online opening salvo to the NCBD. We talk about creating materials for children, and ang ink will be having a digital gallery,
We'll have two
right?
we'll have two
Two
exhibits. Okay, one about reading and one about newly published books from 2019 to present. And then we also have panel discussions coming up about illustrating books with difficult topics. And
Yay! So Yeah, we'll award also the Salanga winners and the
Yes.
Alcala
Yeah.
winners on July 21. And finally, we're able to do it live online. We've been dreaming of this event, not to further or to reach out to people out there. So on July 21, please log in or go to FB page of the BPBY, go to our FB page, and there you will see and you can watch no, the awarding ceremonies of the Salanga Prize winner and the Alcala Prize winner. I will not say who the winners are. Do check our PBBY website and FB page for more information. And the entire program for the month of July for NCBD is there. So please, please,
All right.
please, and patronize our local creators at this time of the pandemic. Our writers, our illustrators, our book publishers, parents, teachers, librarians, researchers, and educators. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liza and Zara, for
Thank
bringing in
you.
PBBY, right? And thank you so much. This has been a
Yes.
very engaging conversation. Mr. Perez from Reading Association of the Philippines.
So I would just like to recommend to our audience to continue to breathe life into text through the text present in the lives of our students, like the labels of canned sardines, the manuals at home, the balutan ng tinapa, and all the rest. And then, if those are the only texts available to them, and then continue to read books, especially Filipino books. We celebrate with PBBY the National Children's Book Day. If they allow us, we will stream that also in the rap page.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
and and make reading enjoyable. Read everything that you see, wonder, and live life. Be happy even during the pandemic. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to our participants. This has been it's been a month that we're doing live sessions, and thank you so much for the wonderful comments. We really appreciate. Thank you for appreciating our speakers. On my part at empowerED, I we promise to continue bringing in the best people to discuss some things. If you've noticed, so thank you for not asking a presentation. These are our live sessions. Our live sessions are discussions, and the experts are just coming in with their wealth of experience and expertise. So we're very grateful. Just one final reminder. Yesterday we had our exclusive webinar in YouTube. We're doing some webinar. I'm delivering webinar, webinars and slash workshops on distance education. And yesterday we had our first audience, our first session with a big audience. We reached around 3,000 registration. And everyone went online in YouTube. It's exclusive in YouTube right now. So next week we will do a session on distance education assessment or assessment in distance education. So please watch out when it's gonna happen. It's around next week. But just for everyone to be able to get notifications, please continue to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's empowerED TV, and then continue to follow our Facebook page, empowerED. Same thing. Reading Association of the Philippines have their own Facebook page. PBBY has their own Facebook page also. So time to search for those wonderful pages in Facebook so that you can get connected and you have you can get notification and updates right in your gadget. So again, stay safe and healthy. Thank you, everyone. God bless all of us at this time of the pandemic. We continue to keep everyone in our mind and in our hearts. We send all our prayers. So for our dear teachers, continue. You are the new frontliners right now. And all of us educators, we are one in this battle to continue pushing, to continue delivering learning at wherever our students right now. So please stay safe and healthy. All right. Bye everyone. Thank you, Liza. Thank you,
Thank
Zara.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Have a
Thank
good
you. Thank you.
Saturday weekend.
Bye.
Bye.